Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Numbers Game webinar this evening. Welcome to the attendees. Fantastic. I can see Miss Carlia has something to say, and we'll wait for the others as they come in. We'll just get started. If you haven't been in a webinar before with me, feel free to use the chat box to communicate with me and I'll answer when I can. We do have space throughout the webinar for questions, but if you think of a question, don't hold back, just ask it as we go. We try to be as interactive as we can. And you can actually speak on the webinar, but we usually turn that feature off just because it can delay and everybody has all sorts of problems. As I mentioned, there will be a recording of this and I'll send you the link to that tomorrow so you can watch it again and again. So I'm hoping that everybody has got their little workbook. You can work along, or a bit of note paper so that you can work along, and we'll get started. So, okay. So we're going to talk about the numbers in business, and I find that I deal with a lot of business owners, beauty therapists, nail technicians, and other beauty professionals in this industry who get into this industry because we love to help people. We want to make people feel better about themselves, and often we care about the therapy side, but we don't always know as much as we want to know about the business side of it. So in the room today, can you let me know whether you are a business owner or an educator or a beauty therapist or nail tech or a bit of everything? If you could just type in the box so that I can see who I'm addressing, that really does help me. I get, with the registrations, I ask you a couple of questions, and I have tried to answer the questions throughout the content of the webinar. So I'm hoping that it'll be useful for everybody, and you can always email me afterwards if you have any further questions. I'm here to help you. Okay, so all right, let's dive right in. So she's a beauty let me just show this down. Fantastic. Okay, so when it comes to the numbers of business, often it's scary. We leave it to the accountant. We get overwhelmed by numbers, or else get driven by numbers. But sometimes people in this, well, I find, and I'm generalising, that a lot of therapists in this area find that they don't understand fully the numbers of what it takes to run a successful business, and even to be a team member in a profitable salon. It's important that we have some understanding of the numbers. So I just want to break it down for you in an easy sense, that I could literally teach an 8-week course on this. We could go into very big depth, and I certainly, this is just going to be touching the surface, but hopefully you'll get some good takeaways to take home with you and learn from. I just wanted to make a little disclaimer. My background is that I am a beauty therapist and nail tech, makeup artist, and I have worked in administration and office management for years and years and years. I'm kind of old, and I have been running my own successful businesses. There's multiple ones for about the last 18 years now, and I've sort of been very busy. I've made lots of mistakes throughout the years, as we all have, but I really invest in myself and my education, and I've done a lot of financial education and classes, and I was a previous bookkeeper in a previous life. However, I just wanted to say that any of the information that I'm giving you today, I'm not an accountant. This isn't a substitution for independent financial advice. Normally I don't give a disclaimer, but I feel like when you're talking about numbers and advice, when it comes to numbers, I just want to put that out there. So I'm hoping that, this will inspire you and you'll go on and learn some more. So on a daily basis, I use lots of different tools. What are you using in the salon to work with the numbers? Is it salon software, or are you working with spreadsheets, or are you working with a combination of both, or it's not something that you actually do yet but you're thinking about doing? So there's so many different systems and so many different ways to manage the numbers of the business. But in my business, we use MyOb, an advanced bookkeeping software, but I also create spreadsheets. And when I have run several salons in the past, I've worked within salons and I've owned my own salons as well. And I like to do things in language that means something to me. So sometimes the accounting packages won't pull out the report that I want. So on a day-to-day basis in my business, we look at daily targets versus the actuals. We look at monthly activity compared to the budgets that we set. I look at my cash flow on a regular basis. And I look at my staff, how my staff are doing and how my clients are doing. So I have asked people in the past what parts of what numbers do business owners look at, and sometimes I get crickets and sometimes I get lots of information, but generally the key in business is to know that there's a lot of numbers and you can pretty much interpret numbers no matter in whatever way you want to, but you need to work out which numbers are important to you so that you can motivate, incentivize, and then measure the numbers so that you know at any one point whether you're getting better, getting worse, doing the same, who's doing better, who's not performing so well. So I think there are about 5 different areas that I think that you should absolutely know. And these are your break-even, and we're going to go through these in depth. I'm just giving the highlights now. So your break-even number, your cost per treatment number, your staff numbers, your transactional numbers, like the numbers of clients you have per day, week, month, the tracking no-shows, treatment revenue versus retail revenue, and your brand specific. So there's a lot of transactional numbers that you'll need to know as well. So it's important that you kind of work out what's important to you so you can make educated decisions on improving your performance, generally speaking. So I'm going to jump back to basics. We're just going to define some terminology for you that relates to the numbers, the things that I'm going to be talking about specifically today. And I'm sorry if this is revision. Well, hopefully it is revision, but if it's not, it doesn't really matter. So I just want to make sure that we're sort of speaking the same language. So if I happen to say revenue, you kind of know what I mean in terms of the language. But I also want you to think about, don't be scared by any of this. It's just, different words, and don't. A lot of people get anxious around maths and numbers and money and all that kind of thing. And I kind of view it as it's kind of a game and it's a way to juggle. You've just got to juggle one thing to the other. And the more you understand, the more you can make the right decisions. Okay. So the first word, and there's a space in your workbook if you wanted to note down the definitions as we talk about them and make some notes. I always think it's better to make notes that are specific to, in your own language. That's why I leave a gap, because I think it's nice to write it in your own words. So revenue basically is sometimes called turnover. It can sometimes be called gross sales, but basically it's all the money that comes into your business, all the incoming money into your business. So, and a lot of people will, especially these days, you see a lot of things online and people say, oh, and I made a, multi-million-dollar business or a 6-figure business. And often they're talking about turnover. And I think it's a little bit, it's great to have a big turnover, but you can have a massive turnover of, $1.5 million and only make a profit of $10. So at the end of the day, the most important one to me is profit. So profit is what's left after once you've got all the money in. So you've taken in your revenue and you've spent the money that you need to run the business. So they're your expenses needed to generate that revenue, and whatever's left is your profit. So, and often beauty therapists, and I've seen it time and time again where beauty therapists, salon owners will come in and they'll say to me, oh, I've got an amazing business. I'm turning over 250,000, it's just me. And then I say to them, well, what's your profit? And they'll say, well, actually, I didn't really make any money. So it comes down to when a business is only viable when it's making something to take home at the end of the day after the expenses come out. So I want you to change your mindset, and of course we have to think about revenue, but we also have to think about profitability and ways to improve our profitability in our business. At EFB Salon Supplies, we talk about the profitability of our business with our team as well, and it really empowers our team to work hard to manage the expenses and keep on target. Okay, so I've sort of talked about expenses. So expenses basically are the costs that incurred by a business in order to generate your revenue. So it sounds a fancy way. So it's all the things that you need to buy in order to make the money. So we know that, we'll have to buy, we have rent, we have staff, we have cost of stock, we have light, we have telephone, we've got the internet bill, we've got marketing. There's a whole lot of things in the expense column. But I just want to point out that there's two types of expenses. There are fixed expenses and variable expenses. And I think that when you're looking at your business numbers, it's important to really isolate the two and divide them and separate them. So in my own profit and loss, I actually divide it very clearly. So let me explain a little bit further and it will make more sense as we move forward. So sorry, I haven't got another slide for this. Anyway, so basically fixed expenses are expenses that you have in the business that basically don't change. So you have to pay them every single month, even if there's no revenue coming in. So generally speaking, they're not sort of dependent on the sales, and it'll be things like your rent, your loans, if you've borrowed money to set up your salon, or all the lights and all those kind of things that you can't get out of in order to run your business. And they pretty much don't change all that much over the various different months. Your rent might be $2,500 a month, and it'll just stay that for the whole entire year. It doesn't go up too much and it doesn't go down too much. And then we have our variable expenses, and variable expenses are changeable. So there are sort of, in my mind, two types of variable expenses. Ones that I kind of group in with my fixed expenses, like say office supplies. So they can vary, because if I'm doing a big mail out, I might need to buy more envelopes or what have you. But if I want to cut them back, I can. So does that make sense? I hope that's clear. And then there are the variable expenses that are relating specifically to my cost of sales. So in a beauty salon, a variable expense would be wax or bedroll, would be a variable expense directly relating to the cost of performing a wax service. Does that make sense? And I like to divide it accordingly in my profit and loss so that I can see how much it's costing me to perform those particular services and get the revenue, and then a group of fixed expenses that basically can reflect what I can't get out of, what my commitments are. And it helps me plan a lot easier, and I can kind of work out my break-even point as well. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is in your notes, is profit. Well, I think we've talked about profit. Basically, you have gross profit, which is your revenue less your variable expenses that are relating to making that expense. That's your gross profit. And then your gross profit less your fixed expenses gives you your net profit, what's left after tax and all those things. It's exactly what's left in the bank at the end of all of your trade. And many businesses don't plan to make profit. They just kind of go with it. And I challenge you to really change your mindset and think about and budget for making profit, because as much as we love doing what we're doing, at the end of the day, we want to make a viable business that is a saleable entity that we can then hopefully move on and sell when we want to. We don't want to have to sell. We want to be able to sell and make good money once we've created this amazing business that somebody else might want to buy. Awesome. So the next one is the break-even point. So basically, when your income, your revenue and your income equals your expenses exactly, and there's nothing left, that is your break-even point. So it's pretty much how much it costs you to do business at any one point. We'll spend a little bit of time on this one, so I'm not going to go into any more detail now. Then, and same with KPIs and budgets. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. So I'll come back to those, but KPI stands for key performance indicators. And if you've ever been employed, often in your employment contract, you'll set, your employer will set KPIs, and businesses have KPIs as well. And basically, I embrace KPIs because it gives me something to work towards. It's almost like my own personal goal. There's business goals, and then it's a way that we can check back and compare and see what we need to do and fix any gaps. And then budgets are a very similar sort of thing, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on as well. So does anybody have any questions on that, or is it clear as mud for now? And I'm hoping that usually I have a lot more humor in my webinars, but sometimes numbers can be a little bit less. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you're enjoying it all the same. Okay, so moving on. This is just an example of the way that we sort of common reports that we'll use. It doesn't come out all that clearly, but hopefully you can see it. These two that I just basically Googled from business.gov and Excel, my Office Excel. The balance sheet comes from Excel template. So they're common things. I just basically wanted to be able to show you. There's lots and lots and lots of reports that you can get out of a business, but it's important that you understand these two at a pinch. So the first one is the profit and loss report. And basically, this helps you analyze your income versus your expenses, and then you can see at any time your profit and loss. So as I said to you before, on my one, I like to actually move some of my expenses up, and then sort of cost of doing business, the variable expenses, but that we won't harp on about that anymore. So it's important to review this at least once a month so you can really see what's going on with your business, so you can notice if there's any major flaws, and you can fix them before they become too much of a problem. Often when it might take 3 to 4 months for a major disaster in business to get noticed if you just keep trading. So it's important that you just keep your eye on these reports and make sure that nothing looks untoward. The other thing is the balance sheet. So the balance sheet, the bank really cares about, generally speaking, but as a business owner, you should care about this too. It's kind of a snapshot of the financial position of your business on a particular day. So it's kind of like it's like your business health check, I guess, and it will show you what your business owns, in terms of assets and stock on hand. It talks about your equipment, any loans or liabilities that you have. It talks about it's really the worth of your business. And so if you want to sell your business or get a loan, you need a balance sheet that reflects a nice healthy bottom line. So that's the aim for it. The other one that I look at a lot is cash flow, and that really just helps me manage paying my bills and the day-to-day running of my business, but I'm not focusing that much on it because I want to talk to you. This is just a revision getting through to the next step. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about salon software versus accounting software. So I've used both sorts, and I think you really need to work out what works best for your brain, your team, and your accountant. I I've used Mild for years. I've used Katoomba, Shortcuts, and other salon software from the dark ages when I was in the salon. And nowadays, the salon software is very integrated. It's very sophisticated and has lots of other benefits that link to social media marketing, client cards, and all that. So I think what you need to do when you're evaluating the way that you're going to go to do this, you need to think about what you want from your software, and then go out and find a solution that works for you. If you have to do things by a spreadsheet and manually for a while till you get your head around it, then that works too. If you want an online clouds-based system that you can check what your staff are doing from your home, then that works for you. All fantastic. So all of these things have different pros and cons, and I just wanted to say it can be a costly mistake, and you want to make sure that you do plenty of research before you sign up for a lot of, for these things. I unfortunately made an expensive mistake where I changed my software package about 18 months ago, and it nearly crippled my business. And I was in so deep that I couldn't get out of it, and it would have cost more to actually get out of it. And so I had to trade through it, and it was very frustrating. So I just wanted make sure that you do your due diligence, and there is nothing to be said than doing sometimes manually. Well, especially for my type of brain, that is a therapy brain. I like to see it in front of me and understand it in words that make sense to me. Okay, so let's go back to break even. So remember that we're talking about that it's when income equals your expenses. And I think that this is something that I had an epiphany about a while back in business, and it's something that's very important to understand from a global aspect of the entire business, which we'll talk about and break down. And then you can do a break even analysis on every single service that you do, every component. You can sort of break it down so that you can see what you need to do at any one point in order to not lose money and then to make money from the transaction. So definitely you can use this formula, and I know that several of the feedbacks that I received in registration was, how do I price, set pricing and things like that. So I'm hoping that this makes sense as we go through the next few slides. I've got examples and things. If it doesn't, please email me and I'll endeavour to explain it to you a little further. So the number one thing that you need to know is your fixed costs. So just to remind you again, fixed costs are things you have to pay for no matter what, and variable costs are things you have to pay for to make the sale. I'm sure that there's probably more technical definitions, but I'm like you, and I just want you to understand the concept, because half the battle is that sort of mental not understanding concepts. And so we push them off until we, know better. One thing that I just also want to say in terms of fixed costs and variable costs is to think about and ask you the question, do you think that staff are fixed or variable costs? So I might just see what the answers come back at. So the cost of a staff member, is that a fixed or a variable cost? And I'll just have a quick drink of my water while you're writing your answer in. And I'll put you on the spot now, and hopefully the technology works. And don't worry if you don't know the answer. Looks like yeah, good. It's all good. I think it's the answer, because actually it was kind of a trick question. So I think that certain staff can be fixed because, for example, if you have full-time staff that you have a regular salary bill that you have to pay no matter what, whether there's a client walks in the door or not, then it's definitely a fixed cost. But sometimes you might have a rush period, or it be over summer, you might be doing a special promotion and you get in casual staff, then that could be a variable cost. So in our calculations, I'm going to use staff as a fixed cost, because generally speaking, I like, as a business owner, and I find that staff work better when they know they feel safe in their work environment, and I like to nurture my team to be the best they can be. So I definitely consider it a fixed cost, but I just wanted to throw that out, So yay, top of the class, awesome. Now, so here's an example. I'm just made up BB Salon de Beauté. So let's have a look at, and this is just an example, and literally I just made the figures up out of air. So what I want you to do after this class is we need to work out what our magic number is, and that basically is how much does it cost you to open the door every day, irrespective of whether you get any income. So this is our magic number. This is the number that we need to find out so that we can work out how much money we need to make. So then it's basically the foundation of It'll be the foundation of your staff targets, your sales budgets, everything. This is what we have to get our magic number. So let's just have a look. So I've put in some of these things we have to make an educated guess. So rent and utilities, I've just averaged an insurance average. Bank charges could be fixed and variable because, for example, we get charged a percentage on our merchant fees, which is really kind of a variable cost, but I kind of lump those things in. I tend to put things that are directly related, like stock costs and things, into my variable expenses. So we're talking about our fixed costs. So you might include a few extra things that you budget and guess for. So same with wages and related expenses, marketing, office supplies and staff amenities. Again, that will vary depending on what's going on. And I've put into this a stock expense estimate, even though technically that can be, in your cost of making the sale. I think sometimes you have to have almost like a float, and you kind of know that you might spend X amount of dollars every month in order to have the stock that you need. So I like to put that in there, and any loan repayment. So there's loads of other things. I recommend that you go to business.gov.au and just they've got like a starting business page, and basically there's like a guide on setting up a business and a plan, and there's lots of templates, and they're all free, and so it's just a good idea to remind you if you are setting up from scratch anyway. All right, so our magic number for BBs is $8,650 a month. Goodness me, I don't know whether that's relevant to now or not. I just kind of plucked some figures from the air. Okay, so then the next page, so we're also going to think about BBs, and she has 2 full-time staff and 3 treatment rooms, a manicure pedicure area, and retail reception. So this is important. Now, the other thing that you need to sort of think about is do a break-even analysis on the services that you have, or you might do an average service or an average room income, because it's important that we kind of break down how much the service costs you. So I'll just use basic facial as an example. So if you're a BioElements client, like all my BioElements clients have quite a detailed cost per treatment spreadsheet that I literally sat down and I weighed out every single product that we needed to perform each treatment, and I worked out that and exactly the cost. So it's a very true cost. And then I think that you have to factor in the time and other sundry expenses in terms of the cost of the facial. So let's say we sell the facial for $120 and we add in $12.50 for linens and whatnot, and then we take out an extra $50 because it's an hour of time, and that's going to be our on cost per hour. So our gross profit for for a facial is $57.50. So you need to go through and kind of really work out each item and how much it's really going to gross you per service. But I'm hoping that makes sense, and that you can go to set this up initially. It can take quite some time, but once you do it and you really do have a much clearer view, and then you'll also be able to see that, an hour pedicure and an hour facial, the pedicure only makes $22. So actually you would be better off to try and push people into having, to steer them towards and recommend them towards having basic facials, because that's going to be more profitable. Sometimes salons don't want to break it down per service. They might break it down based on income per room. So you might sort of say, okay, so I'm making $10,000 a month and I've got 2 rooms, so it's $5,000 a month per room, let's say, gross profit. Or you might work out that you do 25 facials a month, 50 pedicures, and you work it down average month per service. But I personally think that you're better off to go through each individual service and take the time to work out the gross profit per each item, because then all of a sudden, I know we just did an educational event for Cuccio, which is a brand we represent, and I was saying to the girls, they were comparing doing spa pedicures and spa manicures versus doing gel nails, and they were saying, but I make more money doing gel nails. And I said, well, actually you don't. If you break down the cost per treatment and the amount of time that it takes and the energy that it takes to do it, you actually make way more money doing pedicures. And it was like a light bulb went off, because they really realized that you actually have to work smarter, not harder. And sometimes you need to push people in or steer people into your business into areas that do make you more money. And sometimes it's not the thing that you like doing the most, but when you realize that it's much more profitable, it makes a big difference. Okay, so from this, then we have to look. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just for ease sake, I'm going to say that BB Salon only does basic facials, just for the maths. But you can calculate this accordingly, and it's relatively easy to do. But I was trying to make it easy to understand when I was doing the demonstration. We only have an hour, so let's just say we're working on basic facials. I hope that's okay. So let's say we do basic facials and we have a gross profit margin of $57.50 on each facial. So based on our break-even point, our magic number, which is $8,650, we divide that by our profit margin, the leftover bit, by $57.50, and we know that we have to do 150.43 treatments a month to break even. Does that make sense? So you just divide the amount that's left over, your fixed expenses, which is our magic number, into the amount that's left over after you've done the service, and then that gives you the number of treatments that you need to do just to break even. So it's 150.43 treatments a month to break even, and then that works out to be 37.6 treatments per week. Now, I just want to make a note on how I worked out the per week thing, because generally speaking, there's 4 weeks in a month, but some days it's 30, some days it's 31, some days it's 28, some months. So what I usually do is I times the month by 12, and then I divide it by the number of weeks that I trade in a year. So we trade 48 weeks of the year, and we have 4 weeks off over the time of the year. So that's kind of how I work it out. I always do my break even on 48, even though technically most of the time we hear about sometimes 49 or even 50 weeks of the year. But I always say give yourself 4 weeks off, because then you know that 4 weeks it's already covered in the earnings of the previous one. Does that make sense? Okay, so then once you've sort of worked that out, then you can refine it further down into rooms or per staff member. So, for example, in BB, she's got 3 treatment rooms where she could do facials. So that works out to be 50 treatments per month, or 12.5 treatments per week per room. So you can see that by just refining it and reworking the numbers, you've all of a sudden got a target. You know now that you have to do 12.5 facials, or else you're going to go out of business. So then you can make marketing decisions. Okay, I need to do 12.5 facials. How am I going to get the clients into the building to do that? Does that make sense? Okay, and then otherwise you can break it down per staff member. So, for example, in order to get to our magic number, our 2 staff need to perform 75.215 treatments per month, which is 18.8 treatments a week, which is a minimum of 2,256 in service revenue per client to break even. So can you see now, as you sort of start to break that down, you can create targets, budgets, KPIs for specific staff members to measure again, and therefore you are able to track your progress as you're going along. If you don't know what these numbers are, at the end of the week you can go, oh, well, I banked this amount of money, and pretty much there's nothing to empower you to make sensible business decisions on setting forth for growth. However, we have to remember that we are not in business to break even. We're in business to make a profit. And one of the things that I really think is very powerful, and business owners usually start, and typically in beauty therapy, get out of school, go and work for someone, or go and work for them, or decide they want to work for themselves. They do it because they want to go into the therapy, and the money is beside the point. And then all of a sudden they get tired because it's quite a physical job. And then all of a sudden we're looking for the profit. So I want you to write down somewhere on the notes there that you want to plan for profit. So you might say that at the end of year 1, you would like to make a profit of 10% above your break even. So in order to do that, you would get your magic number and times it by 1.1. And then you have a new magic number, which has incorporated your profit. And then you just know that that's your new magic number. I think that it's important not to be too greedy. I think that you have to be realistic, otherwise it's demotivating for everybody. But at the end of the day, there should be money left. So then you might want to create you want to add an IPL machine to your, and IPL services to your service menu. And if you don't plan for profit, then you have no capital there to be able to grow. So you either have to then make a new loan. So I personally believe that it's better to try to do business without borrowing money. And if you plan for profit and plan for growth, then you can plan, I need this amount of money after 6 months, and I'm going to bring in my IPL machine. It's going to cost me this amount, and this is how much extra I need to bring in revenue in order to afford that. And I think that that's very empowering, and it's easier to achieve. Okay, so all right, so I just wanted to reiterate that you can use the break-even calculation to break down the cost of the individual sale, and I put it down the bottom of, I don't know what page it is, underneath break-even, underneath the words, remember though, we're not in business to break even, we're in business to make profit. Just the break-even point is the fixed costs divided by the selling price minus the variable costs. So that's your formula. So you can use that to work out how much your break even is for each particular service. So just to reiterate, we want a magic number, so that has got to incorporate profit. But I think you need to know in your mind how much money you need to bring in the door every single week without fail in order to stay in business. And the other thing is you might also get into the habit that if you go over that break-even point, that you set yourself a cash management account, which is high interest, and you put the money into that high interest and only take the money out afterwards, because that will allow for highs and low periods, because often we get all excited and we have an amazing week and we spend that money, and then next week it dies and there's no clients and we don't know what to do and we've spent that money. So I think that you want to at least give yourself a 3-month window. And the other thing that, just while I'm thinking about it, it's a very good idea to use a cash management account in order to put aside the percentage of revenue that relates to taxation, so that you are prepared and have the money there when it's time for the BAS. It's not a big deal. All the money's aside. You've been earning interest on that money, so there's no harm, no foul. It's the government's money anyway, and then there's no stress when it's time to pay for your BAS. I don't know how many business owners that we see every quarter that don't even buy one thing for their salon because they've spent all their money. And then they haven't got enough to pay for their BAS. So that's a really good habit to get into, and it's one that will actually pay you because you'll get interest on the earnings. Okay, so is there any questions at this point? If you do have one, you could just say yes or no, or how you're going. Are you still with me? You're not losing your mind. I've still got, we've got about 15 more minutes to go, and hopefully you're still inspired and learning something new. Okay. All right. So the next point is our key performance indicators. And I think that basically they're just a simple way to track and measure performance. It shouldn't be something that's hysterical, that when everybody goes, oh my God, I didn't hit my KPIs, or I'm going to be reviewed in a performance review, and they lose their mind. I just find that people, myself included, generally perform better when they know where they're going. And if you've done any of my other webinars before, you will know that I always begin with a destination in mind, and then I can work out how I'm going to get there and track my milestones along the way. And as a business owner with my team, I do that for my team, and the KPIs are part of that goalpost setting and the way that we can measure along the way, so that we can say, oh my God, we're winning, we're on target, or oh my God, why aren't we on target? Quick, let's put in a training strategy so that we are winning at the end of the time, so that we don't all of a sudden get 6 months down the track and go, oh my God, I have to close the business because this didn't work, and everybody was ostriches with their head in the sand. So I think that nutting out the numbers, your break-even point, and working out clearly what you want your team to achieve, and then being quite transparent with that, leads to a successful result for salon owners. So I think it's just important to nut it out. There's lots of different ways that you can write these things down, and I generally write it in almost like a to-do list, and then in a spreadsheet, and then I put review dates. And so I have regular meetings with my team, and we'll talk about our group KPIs, and we'll have private KPI reviews. And I would say that generally speaking, my team do actually believe that this is positive experience. I don't want this to be, you don't want your staff to be traumatized by KPIs, but I think that it generally makes for a much happier environment because everybody knows where they're on. And also, if you can set performance rewards as a result, and so if somebody's really constantly surpassing their KPIs, you can literally, you can reward them for that with bonuses, or, a movie ticket, or whatever you want to do in terms of rewarding your team, and it keeps everybody motivated I think you've got to have KPIs. Okay, so next thing is services versus retail. So I've been asked many times, what's the magic number? What's the salon multiplier? What's the current industry norm? And the ratios are, depending on which salon you talk to, it can be anywhere between 1 to 2 to 1 to 6. And I just think that that's silly, because usually it doesn't make any sense. So what I want you to do is go back to the break even, look at what you want to achieve, and then break that down. On the second to last page of your notes, we're talking about what we want to do is we want to make our figures for our salon. So we want to put in our break-even point times our profit budget, which gives us B, our break-even point, our magic number. Then you can divide the number of hours, or the hours that the salon trades. So say you trade 30 hours a week, and you can do this in two ways. You can either just do if the salon's open for 30 hours, then you would put 30 hours in there, and then the number of staff, you've got 2 staff, so you would put 2 staff. Or you can combine those two and divide. It doesn't really matter. The maths kind of works out the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate our salon staff ratio. So basically we have our break-even point and our profit budget in there. So we have B divided by the number of hours the salon trades will give you one number, and then you divide that by the number of staff, and that will give you the number that each staff member needs to pull in every single hour in order to hit our magic number target. And if we used our BB's example, it worked out to be about $187 on a 30-hour week. That every staff member needed to bring in $187. $187 an hour. So and then to work out the ratio, you would sort of do the cost per staff member that it costs you to employ that staff member, including on-cost superannuation, insurance, work cover, and all that. So let's say it's $50 an hour. You won't be paying the staff member $50 an hour. You might be paying the staff member $30 an hour, and then the on-costs bring it up to $50. So 50 to 187. So it works out to be about 1.31 to 3.75 is what I worked it out. But there's no right and wrong in this. And then it can also come down, do you do that number that each staff member is required to obtain in services or retail, or all services, all retail? What ratio do you do services and retail? And I think that comes down to working with your staff. I like to think of retail as being the cream on the crop, so I would try to make my ratios mostly service-based, maybe 70% service-based and 30% retail-based, but I would have a service to retail equal service to retail target, and I would incentivize my team based on the retail that they sell after that. So I think that that's a good way to do it. And it comes down, all different salons that I know of use different methods to work out their staff ratios, and none of them are wrong. Well, maybe some of them are wrong because they're too understated, but the actual individual ratio and percentage of service to retail revenue, as long as you bring it back to your break-even number and you've got your magic number covered, then I think it doesn't really matter if you're more service-based or more retail-based. I just really truly believe that if you are in a beauty environment and you're not doing retail sales, you're ripping off your business no end, and you can usually make equal amount of profit in the last 5 minutes of the service time by creating retail prescription for the client, and that's kind of free money. So I I really do believe that you should be retailing, because if they're not buying from you, they'll be buying from someone else, and it's just a silly thing. So sorry, I'll jump off my high horse now, but I know that when I had my salon, I would make at least the same amount of money from my retail sales as I did from my service sales, and I was booked out. I used to work 3 days a week in my salon, and I would do anywhere between 8 and 12-hour days, and I was booked out for 6 months in advance, and I would still make more money in retail than my services. So I do believe that there's a lot of power in retail sales, and you don't have to really do all that much as long as you're doing your job, especially in the facial room. If you're doing your job properly, the retail sale at the end should be, and this is my prescription, madam. This is what would you like to take today? You know, and it's quite an easy thing to do if you can get your mindset around, and it's certainly worth investing time and energy in your team in order to create that same mindset. And I find that, you know, if you give your team a little bit of a bonus for selling the retail, then it makes it a hell of a lot easier for them to do that product prescription. Okay, so the short answer is there's no quick answer. It's up to you, but make educated decisions knowing your break-even point. Now we're going to talk about budgets. So I'm not going to look. We're running out of time, and I've got a few little gems that I want to include at the end. And if people request it, I think I'll do a webinar a little bit further on these other things that I'm going to bring up. But I just wanted to really clarify, because a lot of people, you know, they compare themselves against other businesses and want to know what everybody else is doing, and at the end of the day, it's completely irrelevant what everybody else is doing in terms of their numbers, because their numbers aren't your numbers. Your numbers are your numbers, and you need to be responsible for your numbers. So when it comes to budget, you basically a budget really is an educated guess on where you need to be in order to track your performance. So it keeps you on track. So you might, when I say it's an educated decision, you might kind of look back at if you're a startup business, obviously you have to kind of really, really guess and then track against your budget. But if you don't have a budget for your expenses, then how do you know if you've gone over budget? And then if you're working out your magic number based on your educated guess, and then you're not tracking it, you can blow out before you've even got out of control. And it doesn't need to be, you know, and you can change your budgets. I know I've done several classes on budgeting, and one lady I was sitting next to, she just didn't quite understand it. And she said to me, so we can change the budget throughout the year? And I said to her, of course you can. You can vary it depending on what happens. The needs of the business will change, and therefore your budget has to reflect it accordingly. All of a sudden you're starting to turn clients away, and you need to put on another staff member. You need to renovate a new room. So then you have to look at how much that's going to cost you, your new break even, and sort of reassess. And she was like, oh, my God, my life has changed, because she really realised that it was easy to do. So don't be too scared about that. And I would say to you, just put it in a spreadsheet and then just use it to track against. Or if you can do it in your software, fantastic. But just go through, have a look at all your expenses, and make an educated guess at how much it's going to cost you annually, how much it's going to cost you monthly, and make sure that it fits into your break-even analysis. Does that make sense? Hope so. All right, let's move on. Just again, it kind of comes leading on from budgets. So important in business that you track what you're doing, that we test and measure. So when you're making a change, you might decide that you're going to use a new spray tan, or you're going to do a specialist facial treatment. And if you don't track your performance, then you don't know whether it's successful or not. So things that you would track on a regular basis is your rebooking rate, the rebooking rate of each of your team members. If you can fill at the end of your every service, if you can have an 80% rebooking rate, when the person leaves, you will have a successful business, guaranteed. And then you need a good follow-up process so that you make sure that they don't no-show. And you need to track your no-shows. You need to track how often they're happening. Are they happening with the same people, and work strategies in order to minimise those. I know that I used to have quite a low percentage of no-shows, and then I started extended my hours working late to accommodate my clients, and all of a sudden I had all these no-shows. So I was working all these ridiculously long hours and people weren't turning up, and it was really not good. And so I said to my clients, you know what? I did this for you guys because you wanted extending trading terms, and now you're not showing up. So any bookings after this time have to be prepaid. And all of a sudden, they didn't no-show anymore. So you need to be able to have that information in front of you so that you can make those decisions. You need to track your retail sales, who's doing what, who's best, who's your retail starlet. Perhaps it's better to work with your receptionist and your therapist and set up your retail sale as you do the prescription in the treatment room, and then the receptionist close the sale if such and such can't close the sale. You might need to do more training in that particular area. Everybody wants to come to work and find work's enjoyable. I truly believe in that, and encourage that in my team. And often it's because people don't know how to do something is why they don't want to do it, or they don't do it. They just shy away from it, and they don't want to look like a doofus because they don't know how to do something. So therefore they sort of don't. So I believe in regular training and motivation to my team. How can you track to see whether something worked in terms of marketing if you don't track it? And same with promotions. And I just wanted to put that in there because I think it's important that you track and have a way to track that, and it comes back down to numbers. So you might see in February you had 20 no-shows, and then you implemented per week, and then you implemented a new thing, and then in March you had only 2 no-shows a week, so you know it was working. You implemented a prepay, and all of a sudden your client went down. Oh my God. So if you don't sort of know what you're doing, then and you're not tracking those things, you're not going to be able to make sensible decisions. Does anyone have any questions before I give you my other little interesting tidbits at the end of this webinar? Anyone? I can't see any questions, so I'm hoping that you're still with me, and I'm hoping that you can all still hear me, but I'll keep moving forward because I can certainly talk. Okay, so I've just got two more things to say, and if you're interested, I would like to consider doing a webinar specifically on this. This is something that I found that really blew me away when I first saw this chart, the true cost of discounting. So once you know what your margin is, and the margin is the percentage difference between the cost of sales and the money that comes in and how much it costs you to do it. So it's a percentage difference between. So in retail, the margin's usually around about 50%. In wholesale, it's around about 30%. So this one's based on a wholesale margin, but it's quite an interesting little table, because if I give a client a 10% discount, in order to make the same amount of revenue, I have to sell 50% more in order to make the same amount of money. Isn't that crazy? Like, that literally blows my mind. So I'm very thoughtful when I'm packaging things, because I want to value add rather than taking money off. And even though it is a little bit of semantics, if you can give something that has a perceived value, you can usually end up sort of transferring the cost of that and not having to sell such a huge amount more. Isn't that crazy? So like in a retail environment, let's say 45%, and you give a 10% discount, you have to sell 29% more in order to make the same amount of revenue. That does my head in. So on the other side of the coin, I constantly mention to my clients in the showroom and in my classes about the fact that they haven't put their prices up. And we put our prices up according to the distributors and the costs of doing business on a relatively infrequent basis because we're in a highly competitive market. But there are certain things that you can do. So if you offer a unique service and your book is full, you should be putting your prices up. If you lose 10% of your clients, but you end up making more, if you say you lose 10% of your clients, you will actually, and you increase your prices. So down the bottom it says increases the price and it says discount percentage. It should say increase price increase percentage. So you increase your price by 10%, you will make 25% less. You make the same amount of dollars. Isn't that crazy? So it's quite amazing that just putting a small amount on, you will actually you could lose 25% of your clients and still make the same amount of money. So I just wanted you to think about that because it's that when I first saw this thing, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Putting my prices up, because those people that can't afford you will move on, and usually they're the people that give you the biggest headaches anyway. So I just wanted to give you that one. And the other one is, this is the one that I think that we would need to do a whole webinar on. And this is something I learned from working with on the Whatever It Takes program with Unlimited Business. And it's a successful business formula, and it's based on tracking your business based on the number of leads, converting those into customers, and then once they're customers, tracking the number of transactions, their average dollar sale, which will give you your revenue, and then times by your profit margin, so that's taking out all your expenses, gives you your gross profit. So in my business, we track all of these things. Now, if you are tracking these things and you increase them by 10%, so just let's look at the first column. So let's say we get 4,000 leads and we convert those leads into 25% conversion rate. So every 4,000, it could be 400, but let's just do it because this was the maths. You get 25% of those people that you meet become clients, and then they come in twice a year, and then each time they come in they spend $100. So that gives you a revenue of $200,000. You have a profit margin of 25%, and that gives you your final profit, your net profit of $50,000 at the end of the day. Okay, so if we were to increase those gold items by 10%, just 10%, so all of a sudden we would now have 4,400 leads. We convert an extra 10% of them, so now it's 27.5%. We get them to buy 2.2 times a year and spend an extra $10 a year. Then our revenue goes up to $292,829. And if we can increase our profit margin by reducing some of our expenses or renegotiating a better deal with our suppliers or whatever we do, our profit goes up by $30,525.50. That's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? So then as your team, you can say, well, look, we're going to be working on increasing the average dollar sale that a client comes in. So we might say, look, I can't do 10% because I can't get 10% of leads, but we're going to work this month on increasing the number of transactions and the average dollar sale for our client. So they usually spend $100, so we want them to spend $120, so 20% more. And you can jig the figures, and all of a sudden you can see how it's going to affect your bottom line. And it's very powerful, it's very motivating, and it also breaks it down for you so that you can really see the difference and how you can really make a change in your business and where it's going to come from, and then you can track that. So I just thought that that is really such a powerful thing. So if you'd like me to do more on that, and this is more to do with marketing and also, again, the numbers of business, but I kind of felt like we needed to cover the basics first. Okay, so I just wanted to say that you're amazing. Don't forget it. Remember it. Make time to celebrate your accomplishments, no matter how big or how small they are. Celebrate your milestones with yourself and your team, and surround yourself with people that are doers, not the ones that believe and do, people that take action. So I'm hoping that you take action and that you learned something today, and that you take action and send me a little message, and hopefully that you enjoyed this webinar and that you've got some useful information that you can take on your journey as a business owner or an employee. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to send me more information, please email me. I'm just jai@absolutespa.com.au, and I'd love to know your feedback. So if you'd like to type anything, otherwise normally I just turn this off, and I'll send you the recording tomorrow. So thank you so much. I'm just going to click stop,